Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Lieutenant Lance Sigersmith. I'm the commander of the Hartford Police Intelligence Division. And what I'm going to do is just go around the room. I'm going to mention some of the people that are here, thank them for coming, thank them for their contributions, and then we'll hear from some of the speakers that you're here to listen to and go through some of the statistics for the first year of the Hartford Shooting Task Force. I'd like to first start out by thanking and acknowledging the members of the Hartford Shooting Task Force that are here, all the detectives, the supervisors, and the commanders that took part in that. They're all here in the back of the room, and without them and the hard work, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you to all them that are here in the back of the room.
Okay, if you don't know it.
And I'd like to start by acknowledging some of our partners that are here and those that contributed from the Chief State's Attorney's Office. I'd like to start with Deputy Chief State's Attorney Len Boyle, who is here, Supervisory Inspector Robert Hughes, who is also here, and there's several of the attorneys that are here as well. I can't acknowledge them all, but they're here participating extensively. I'd also like to acknowledge from the State's Attorney's Office, State's Attorney Gail Hardy, who is here as well, and several of her prosecutors are here in the office also. With that, also from the Connecticut State Police, we have Major Hyatt is here. Major Hyatt over there. Captain Garabedian is also here. From the Department of Corrections, we have sub-representatives here from the Department of Corrections, parole, and probation also. So the list goes on, and I don't mean to miss anybody. I try to acknowledge those that I see standing here in front of me. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Chief Ravella and his opening remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Ravella. I'm the Chief Inspector for the Chief State's Attorney's Office. I'm also the Acting Chief of Police for the City of Hartford. So I wear two hats for a while now, and I'm happy to tell you I can wear both hats right now. When we first started this endeavor early in June of last year, we put together quite a formidable group of individuals and agencies. The Chief State's Attorney's Office, the Hartford State's Attorney's Office, the Connecticut State Police, Probation, Parole, Corrections, the federal agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, several local police departments, Manchester, East Hartford, West Hartford, and our new partner on a part-time basis, Weathersfield. We also have some very quiet, unsung heroes, to include the United States Attorney's Office and the Governor's Office, who has financially supported this endeavor. Moving on very briefly to some of the statistics which were all handed out. When we first started, we had an uptick of approximately 13.9% in violent crime, particularly in people shot. We reduced that amount, and over the course of the year, we have a 27.3% reduction in violent crime, people shot. There are 11 fewer homicides over that time frame. There are also a 67% solvability factor for our major crime unit for the homicides that they worked on. That is staggering numbers, folks, staggering numbers. Considering some of the national averages run around 20%, more locally we're in the 40%. This is staggering numbers for everyone. And the statistic which we are very, very proud to tell you, there are 51 less shooting victims last year, 51. And that tends towards our cycle of violence which we're trying to break. So if we look at that, there's 51 fewer families that have to cope, 51 fewer victims, 51 fewer defendants' families. And that also is a staggering amount of medical costs for 51 shooting victims that the state didn't have to pay, because most of our shooting victims are either underinsured or non-insured at all. So that's a very important public health aspect. The statistics just keep going after that, between firearms seized, people arrested, so on and so forth. But this component is a very valuable component to the Hartford Police and to the region, because we're now seeing that we are fishing with more of a spear. I don't look for hundreds and hundreds of arrests. I look for those violent people that are impacting our city and our region on a daily basis with these people shot. So with that, That is somewhat of an overview of what we're talking about here today, and I'd like to introduce to you the mayor of the city of Hartford.
Thank you for being here, and very pleased to have the chief indicate the results of the effort for the shooting task force for the past year. And I would like to thank all the partners, our State's Attorney's Office, our State Police, FBI, Probation, Parole, State's Attorney's Office. We know it's not only being able to apprehend offenders, but also to have a way of not losing track of the offenders within the maze of the halls of justice, and make sure that we follow up. But I think as we reflect over the last year, for me as a mayor, is also a good opportunity to think forward and regroup. And I've always been on the record as saying that we can reduce and continue to reduce homicides and shootings, but I will not be at peace until we hopefully get rid of all the violence. It's something that we need to do. So as I look forward for the next year, how do we work together? How do we bring together and incorporate more folks into this effort? How do we incorporate our education system? How do we incorporate our communities? There's no one here more impacted by the crime and violence than our communities, and they're willing partners. They want to be willing partners, but they're going to need some guidance. They're going to need some help supporting communication between the communities and between City Hall, between the council, between the police department. Our communities really hold the key to making this effort more successful than what it's been so far. And I do want to thank, as a matter of fact, a lot of these efforts also would not have succeeded without our communities being partners, giving us vital information that we can use. The solvability rate is just incredible. And in order to get high levels of solvability in terms of the crimes that are committed, the shootings and the homicides, the community holds an important key to that aspect. So I want to emphasize that role. Very glad that we've had this progress. This hopefully will translate and will continue to translate to eradicate the perception, the unfair perception that is oftentimes given to our city in terms of what is really happening in our city. It tears me apart. It tears me apart every time we have a homicide. I don't care who it is. I don't care what they were doing on the street. It is a human life. And I know that for a lot of these individuals, life, whether it was in their upbringing or whether it was just a result of some societal stuff that goes on that somehow seems to give some a little bit less opportunity. I feel for the families of those victims. I feel for those victims. A life is a life, and to me, each and every single life is sacred, it is valuable, and we have to continue to work as a community. Having said that, I hope that during the next year, in building these bridges between community, that we can take hold of whatever resources we have in the city to create more opportunities. We have an opportunities effort that will go into the implementation phase. Hopefully through that effort we will try to create more opportunities in terms of employment, income, and education for our community, so that while we have a strong fist that says that we are not going to tolerate violence in our city, we also provide, given our limited resources, whatever opportunities we can to our community so that we can continue to eradicate violence in our community. So again, I want to thank our Chief Rovella, who has been out there in the trenches. He's just not directed from his desk. He has been out there in the community. He has been out there in the trenches. We rode around a couple of times, and when you ride around with these folks, then you really get to appreciate. And you really get to value the police work that gets done, and to value how these fine, young, and not so young sometimes, men and women of our police forces and our public safety agencies really do put their lives at risk in order to protect our community. So I want to thank each and every one of them. I want to thank the governor and our state's attorney, Bill Hardy. It's a little bit over a year ago. I believe it was around May. Probably actually a little bit earlier. I think it was April that we started to meet and strategize because we had a short window of about less than 60 days to really get all the resources together and strategize. So I want to thank you for your dedication and your effort. And while the news is good, it's very good. It shows that very purposeful and directed action towards a problem can really get results. I am really looking forward to continuing to work to continue to make improvements and continue to do the most important thing that I have to do as mayor, which is keeping our community safe. So thank you all so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the state's attorney for the Hartford Judicial District, Ms. Gail Harvey.
Good afternoon. As Mayor Segarra mentioned, we began meeting about 16 months ago. What we were dealing with in Hartford at that time was an increase in the number of shootings, an increase in the number of homicides, and we realized that we needed to do something to address the uptick in violence. About 13 months ago, many of the persons who are in this room today met at a community center on Martin Street in Hartford to announce the formation of the Shooting Team Task Force. It would be joined with members of the Manchester Police Department, East Hartford, West Hartford Police Departments, as well as our state and federal partners. Unfortunately, that night, we had a homicide that occurred almost across the street from where we held that press conference. That is the nature of the brazen persons who are out on our streets. Those are the persons who have no regard with respect to where they're shooting, at whom they're shooting. They'll shoot in residential communities. They will shoot in areas where children play. And we had to do something about that. So the formation of the team came at a good time. As the mayor indicated, we had a number of meetings in my office to try to assemble the right group of people to address this increase in violence. And I think we got it. I think we were able to put together a good working group of state, federal, and local prosecutors. Basically, what happened as a result of the shooting that occurred on July 1st, 2011, was one of our prosecutors, David Zagaya, was assigned to prosecute that case, the case of the person who was arrested that night. And I believe it was in March, the individual pled guilty and was sentenced to 42 years to serve in jail. That is a good result. Dave Zagaya was also responsible for prosecuting one of our shooting team matters to trial. Again, that person was sentenced to 40 or 42 years to serve, but we've had a number of cases that have been disposed of favorably, either through pleas or they're currently on our trial list. Those are the things that we are trying to do. Make sure that we have the cooperative efforts of our state, our federal and local police departments, as well as the cooperation of our prosecutors to handle these cases, to make sure that the people who live in Hartford and our neighboring communities are able to come into our city, are able to walk through their own communities and to be safe. That's what we're looking for through this shooting team task force, But again, it wouldn't be possible with just that small group of shooting team members alone. We also have a fine group of Hartford police officers who work in patrol, who work in vice and narcotics, who work in major crimes, who are also out there making arrests for gun cases. And I commend their efforts as well, so that, again, we may have a cooperative effort in reducing the violent crime in Hartford and in our neighboring communities. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce from the Office of the Chief State's Attorney, Deputy Chief State's Attorney Leonard Boyle.
Last year, when Mayor Segarra, Chief State's Attorney Kevin Kane, State's Attorney Gail Hardy, and Chief Ravella embarked on this shooting team concept, they engaged in somewhat of an act of faith. Because as we know, when you agree to tackle a problem and commit to it, you now own it. Took a substantial amount of courage to take that on, but they did it because they knew they had the right partners in place. And thanks very much to the efforts of the Connecticut State Police, surrounding municipal police departments, and our federal partners, they've been able to put that in place, and the results, as you have seen, are startling. Hartford had an intolerably high rate of violent crimes, particularly violent crimes involving firearms. It was threatening to spike even higher in 2011. The results of the shooting team concept have been remarkable. I would suggest to you that there are probably three primary reasons for it. The first is the integrated approach that Chief Ravella has put in place, which involves the very close involvement of law enforcement officers and prosecutors at State's Attorney Hardy's office, so that these particularly dangerous people can get the treatment that they deserve in court, so that they get the sentences that get them off the streets, get them out of the communities, and allow better things to happen in the communities that they came from. Secondly, the tremendous work that's been done by the law enforcement officers, many of whom are here, both those assigned to the shooting team and members of the Hartford Police Department and other surrounding police departments. Their work has been phenomenal, and I have to say that in 30 years of law enforcement, an enterprise that is often riven with petty disputes, I have never seen the sort of cooperation that we have seen in this effort, and it's a tribute to everybody in this room for the way they have set aside their own egos, their own agenda, to commit to making this work and to solving some of the violent crime problems that exist in Hartford. And finally, to the community of Hartford, because what I have heard from the officers who are on the street is that the people of this city have embraced this concept as well. They are finding much more cooperation from the community than they had originally received or expected. It's a clear sign that the people of this city want effective law enforcement. They want to participate with the police officers when they are with dedicated police officers who they know care about them, care about their kids, care about their ability to send their families to church, to school, and to work without fear of being shot or caught in some sort of violent act. They're willing to embrace that. They're willing to join with that. They have done so, and they're to be commended for that. And as you know from some of the things that the Chief has spoken about, though there are other programs in place that will hopefully continue to foster that sort of community involvement with the law enforcement effort. Thank you.